Story 1. Spiritfarer is a game about loss and grief. It was to be expected. I was not, however, prepared for how deeply one of the departures would affect me. I sobbed and stopped playing. I still have not finished the game, though I do recommend it. It is beautiful. Story 2. In Borderlands 2, during the Tiny Tina's assault on Dragon Keep downloadable content, Tina finally acknowledges Roland's death. Story 3. Titanfall 2. Never thought I would love a robot that much. Not to mention the final Trust Me. Rest in peace BT 7274. Story 4. Kingdom Hearts 1 was the game that impacted me when it was released. I have revisited it several times. It still resonates. Story 5. Mass Effect, the whole series. You spend hours trying to save the galaxy and lose people from the start. Many die based on your decisions, and there is nothing you can do. The best moments are when you save the day and the Virgil theme plays. You know there is more work to do, but you can take a break and rest for now. The good moments hit harder than the times of failure. 13 years since my first playthrough, and my heart races meeting Rex in Game 2. Shepard, my friend. Story 6. I'm surprised nobody has mentioned Cyberpunk 2077. The vibrant city and high technology caught my attention, but the atrocities that you have to endure and watch others go through left a knot in my throat a couple of times throughout the main playthrough. And do not even get me started on the Phantom Liberty downloadable content. So many playthroughs and it still hits in the feels. Story 7. Shadow of the Colossus. The whole game made me feel strange. It is so eerie and isolated. The ending made me feel depressed in a way. It is a work of art. Story 8. Possibly Silent Hill 1. There is a non-player character named Lisa Garland who is a character you essentially save. She practically clings to you and is scared. She has no idea what has happened. Some mild spoilers involved. Lisa Garland is innocent throughout the whole game but is manipulated by a doctor who is making her into an addict, similar to Nurse Jackie. The drugs fueling Lisa's addiction actually erase her memory. So without constant drugging, Lisa is confused in a very haunted hospital setting. To avoid spoiling the game, at some point you wean Lisa off the drugs, and she remembers what happens. Sadly, the entity transforms her into one of the monsters. It is a horrible transformation of this pure and kind character, simply turning into a bleeding figure all over. The music is heartbreaking, breaking the audience's heart with slow guitar and sound as she struggles with becoming a monster. Your character has no choice but to shut the door on her and keep her in that room. She is bawling and crying as she loses her humanity. Story 9. Outer Wilds. For a while afterward, I would replay it whenever I felt like I needed to cry but couldn't, just because the ending would affect me so deeply. Story 10. Death Stranding. I picked it up during the pandemic, and the theme of connection when everything felt so disconnected really spoke to me. Story 11. Red Dead Redemption 2. Saying goodbye to my sweet horse, watching the sunrise as that music played. I will never get over that, and I do not think any game could ever match what I felt there, or from that story as a whole. Story 12. Final Fantasy XIV, the following expansions: Heavensward, Shadowbringers, and Endwalker. After certain scenes, I had to take breaks from the game because I was so emotionally exhausted I needed time to recover, sometimes days or weeks away. I still cannot listen to Close in the Distance without immediately sobbing like a baby. Story 13. To the Moon is still one of the most tragic games I have ever played. There is no real happy ending either. I still cannot listen to the music without feeling a certain type of way. Story 14. Spiritfarer. I do not want to give anything away, but you can play it in a day or two, and it made me cry for a good 2 hours. Story 15. Borderlands 2. In the Tiny Tina's assault on Dragon Keep downloadable content, when Tina finally acknowledges Roland's death. Story 16. Whenever games include the staff's births, deaths, and marriages that happened during the development of the game in their credits, it adds a personal touch. The Outer Worlds did this beautifully. They had a couple who met on the first day at Obsidian and got married when the game was released. That beautiful story moved me deeply. Story 17. I Played Brothers. A Tale of Two Sons cooperative with my youngest son. We went in unaware, and when the twist came near the end of the game, my son just sat there in shock and almost started crying. I gently encouraged him to finish the game, and then we had a talk about loss, grief, and acceptance. Story 18. So many games have scenes that impacted me deeply. Halo for when you were talking to Cortana in the bubble. Expedition 33. I cannot spoil anything, but it was intense. Mass Effect has some memorable scenes, including Andromeda when you find the Exaltation Factory. I immediately thought I would stop them all. The Last of Us Part 1. That intro scene was very powerful. Titanfall 2 BT at the end was difficult for me. Cyberpunk 2077. Many aspects of that game are amazing. Story 19. I do not know how well it has held up, but Heavy Rain is a dark, depressing game. However, it is amazing and worth a full playthrough at least once. Story 20. After having children of my own, Detroit Become Human provoked a few tears in the Alice storyline. Oh, and Minesweeper when you are down to a 50-50 choice to win or die and you die. Story 21. Sonic Adventure 2 ending was the first game to affect me emotionally. The music and character dialogue. Sayonara. Shadow the Hedgehog. The original ending of Fallout 3 also made me cry. The zoom in on the picture of you and your father on your birthday with the mobile playing in the background. Thinking, these people gave a life of security for this. The Fallout games are very emotional if you turn off in-game music and just listen to ambience. Coming across a room full of skeletons huddled together for comfort with a radio playing in the corner really hits differently, especially if you read any notes that go along. Story 22. The reveal in Amori, especially the first one where you learn that the real Mari is dead, was a gut punch I wasn't expecting. Kingdom Hearts 3 ended in a way that left me feeling hollow for a while. I'm glad there is more planned eventually. Final Fantasy XIV continues to affect me deeply with Horchefint's death. The buff his spirit gave me in that one Endwalker dungeon went to waste because I had to physically stop advancing as I couldn't see through the tears. I'm just glad I was with non-player characters. Story 23. I would not say it wrecked me emotionally, but Beyond Two Souls is the only game that has made me cry. Story 24. Paperboy. I could never get past the first couple of levels being so young. The Angry Neighbors. The Grim Reaper. Story 25. Red Dead Redemption 2 is the first game that made me fully mourn a fictional character well after playing it. Story 26. Skyward Sword. I was about 10 years old, and it was my first The Legend of Zelda game. The scene where Fi says goodbye devastated me. Story 27. Silent Hill 2 did not make me sad, but it affected me deeply. Nightmares and everything. I guess that counts. Story 28. Maybe a silly one, but I played through Journey and felt very emotional at the end. Not wrecked, but it was a good game, and the ending was very beautiful in a way. Story 29. It did not wreck me, but I was definitely affected by the ending of Outer Wilds. The realization of what was required to win the game made me quit for an entire day before going back to it. Story 30. The Last of Us, because of Sarah, and The Last of Us Part 2, because of Joel, Spider-Man 2018, because of May, and Telltale's The Walking Dead, because of Lee. Story 31. The Witcher 3 was the first game where I reached a point of abandoning all decision-making and killed a character out of pure hatred. I purposely kill Whoreson Jr. in every playthrough because he deserves to suffer the most severe punishment. Story 32. I'm playing through The Last of Us Part 2 right now and it's rough. Seeing him die and Ellie dealing with the trauma, the game has better written characters than most shows. Story 33. Dishonored High Chaos Run. Watching Emily transform into a psychopath due to my actions. I never killed another soul after that. Story 34. For me, I think Undertale sounds a bit predictable, but the true pacifist ending made me feel like I just met an old friend who had died and came back as a ghost briefly just to say goodbye one last time. Also, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure hit hard through all of the parts because it was one of the few shows where the risks felt real. Story 35. I'm shocked I scrolled all the way through the comments and not a single person mentioned Plague Tale. Requiem. The ending is such a gut punch. Amisha fights through armies of rats and men, all to save her little brother from this all-consuming corruption, only to find out it's all for nothing. The only way to save everyone is to kill her little brother, and the game makes you sling the stone yourself. Story 36. I'm not sure how to answer. There are feelings of frustration, and for that, I think games like a difficult game about climbing fit well. As for ones where the story has an emotional impact, I thought Firewatch had a very sad storyline. Story 37. The Darkness. The girlfriend dying hit very hard for a video game death. That game is a gem for people who like good storytelling and large amounts of violence. Story 38. Last of Us series, Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, mainly because Valhalla is very immense with tragic side quests. Story 39. Arkham City. The music score was both thrilling and mournful. There are many standout moments, such as Alfred telling Bruce that Batman must put the city ahead of his own desire to save Talia. In the final confrontation at the theater, after the shock and the death, Batman's final words to the Joker were that he would have saved him despite everything he had done. Story 40. Easily Red Dead Redemption 2. I learned from my friend's mistakes, and I had high honor and a good reputation with my horse. When Arthur said thank you, I paused and just cried. Story 41. Not the first one, but most recently, 5 years ago, Cyberpunk 2077. I got the Nomad ending with Pan Am as a Nomad character, my first, and it hit me so hard. All the calls with the people I met along the way. I am getting into my real adult life, and it hits harder now. Story 42. Red Dead Redemption 2 was the first game that ever overwhelmed my feelings. It was an amazing experience. I loved it. It is bittersweet because it became my father's favorite game of all time, and now he is sick in hospice, about to live the rest of his life. Playing that game now is going to hurt even more. Story 43. Telltale Walking Dead. Brothers. A Tale of Two Sons. Red Dead Redemption 2. The Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2. It took me a while to process everything with Part 2. Story 44. Red Dead Redemption 2. It is the first Red Dead game I played, and I cried a little at the ending when I got the good cutscene. Story 45. Silksong. Mostly because I have been waiting 6 or 7 years. In all seriousness, Outer Wilds is extremely good and really toyed with my emotions in the best way. Sadness, fear, surprise, awe, and more. Story 46. Super niche, but the death of Corporal Brooklyn Bloomfield in Call of Duty 2. Big Red 1 was pretty emotionally shocking for me when I was younger. Story 47. Last of Us Part 2. When the main character is no longer your favorite because you know the full story. What a dreadful final scene. I felt disgusted not knowing how it might end. Story 48. Detroit. Become Human. Lots of sad content, some hopeful moments, but it often made me feel either on edge or sad. I cried a number of times. Story 49. Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker. That slow walk with all of the allies you have met over a whole in real-life decade cheering you on. That got me good. Story 50. The Cyberpunk 2077 credits song, the cover of Never Fade Away in a woman's voice, hit me so hard. Where the original is Johnny expressing his feelings about his relationship with Alt, shown through flashback sequences, the credits version felt like V expressing her feelings about her complicated relationship with Johnny, with the same lyrics but a completely different style, especially coming off a 4-hour endgame run and everything that entailed. It was a lot. Big cry and added to almost every playlist I make. Story 51. Probably GLaDOS' backstory from Portal is not really that bad. But for me it was existential. Imagine being forced into an artificial intelligence to live on for centuries, your consciousness controlled at the press of a button, then having your personality altered and going mad. Creepy stuff. Story 52. Like a Dragon Gaiden. Seeing Kiryu just break down like that and talk about his grandson really moved me. An honorable mention would be Rosalina's story from Super Mario Galaxy because I wasn't expecting all of that from a Mario game. Story 53. I have a few. Valiant Hearts. Spiritfarer. Child of Light. Red Dead Redemption 2. The Last of Us Part 1. Those are the ones that really got me. Story 54. The one scene in The Walking Dead Telltale, Clementine, keep your hair short. I sat there staring at the screen like I had just lost a real person. Story 55, Stray. The game has several very powerful moments, such as when B12 realizes who he used to be and what happened to him and his family. In the end, what happens to B12 and how the outsider reacts are very powerful. Story 56. I only discovered the Fable series during lockdown. Anyway, Fable 2 had me crying like a baby, big, chest-heaving, ugly, snot-nosed blubbering, all because of the dog. Story 57. Mother 3 for the Game Boy Advance with a small English translation patch. Thanks to Tomato for the translation. Thanks to the original strman.net community. Story 58. Ghost of Tsushima side quest where Gene goes around with his nanny, I think it was, and she has lost her mind and keeps referring to Gene as her dad. He finally accepts it and she dies. Dealing with a lot of loss of family and elderly, this hit me. Story 59. Doki Doki Literature Club. I'm gonna get into spoilers, so if you haven't played it, go play it. Speak Gaming. Also, a trigger warning for depression and suicide. Much like everyone, I thought it was just a cutesy dating simulation using a literature club as its theme. But when Sayori started acting weird, I knew something was wrong since I had multiple friends with depression and recognized the signs. When she told the main character that she had depression, it hit so close to home because my now boyfriend had told me just a few days before, so that already affected me deeply. Then, when you get the choice to confess to her, it got even worse since I had been thinking about confessing to him for a while. Then, the infamous day, I gently opened the door. I had no idea where that would lead. So it's safe to say that when I saw Sayori's dead body hanging from her ceiling, I was left in shock for 2 minutes. Then, I legitimately started crying. It hit so close to home that I, a usually stoic person who rarely cries, started genuinely crying on a call with friends who I was playing the game with. The only other time I cried because of a game was a few years later with Cyberpunk after another suicide ending. But that's a whole other topic. That's my talk. Thank you for reading. Story 60. There have been a few, but the most recent was Warframe. It has several storylines that deal heavily with loss, betrayal, and longing. The Jade Shadows update especially. I never imagined that a free-to-play action game would go so deep. Story 61. Shadow of the Colossus. I was enjoying it until I got to the little boar you light on fire, drive off a cliff, and jump spear to beat. I just felt bad. I never finished the game. Story 62. Detroit. Become Human. There was a point where I had to put it down and did not touch it for a few weeks because I could not bear to see what happened next. Then I continued because I realized I was abandoning them. Story 63. That's a tie between Detroit. Become Human and Slay the Princess. Both are choose-your-own adventure stories that put you in the world, with choices in your hands, as well as the consequences that follow. Above all, the best part is that it makes each choice you make matter. It is all important. Story 64. The Walking Dead Season 1, 2, and 4 from the Telltale series. I think everyone knows why. It showed me, as a younger kid back then, how far people can go for their loved ones, what happiness and sadness can be. It helped me in my own character development. It made me realize how important human kindness is. But of course, Silent Hill 2 and all Life is Strange games are also among my top favorites. Story 65. Red Dead Redemption 2. The main factor that affects Arthur is the unexpected. The game allows you to choose how well your path to redemption goes and how much the ending impacts you. Story 66. The Last of Us Part 2. I kept letting Abby win the quick-time events in hopes that the fighting would just stop. And then that talk with Joel at the end, a massive tearjerker. Story 67. The Last of Us Part 2 also came out around the height of the coronavirus pandemic, so times were already emotionally challenging. This game absolutely wrecked me. Story 68. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. Explorers of Sky. I was not expecting a plot that deep or to end up crying multiple times. If you enjoy games that explore morality and tough emotional decisions, play this game as soon as possible. Story 69. First time finishing either Crisis Core or Final Fantasy X. Crisis Core may involve an overly exaggerated portrayal of Zack, but seeing him go from a happy do-gooder to a worn-out, exhausted soldier who lost all his friends and the emotional breakdown during gameplay was sad. Final Fantasy X is a real tearjerker at the end. A true hero's story. Everything revolving around Tidus and Yuna is heartbreaking. Deciding that her life is worth more than your own, even knowing that your fate is to vanish into nothingness. Not played Final Fantasy X2, The Last of Us Part 1. A cliché answer, but the performances of Joel and Ellie are spot on, especially if you are a parent. On the same vein, God of War and God of War Ragnarok. Silent Hill 2 Remake. As someone who loves horror, I did not expect this story to hit so hard. James's story is sad and full of pain, secrets, and guilt, but it is so believable. The actor portrays the emotions James felt perfectly. While my personal story is not as extreme as that of James, his reason for what he did is highly relatable. Story 70. Red Dead Redemption 2's main story. I sat and sobbed when Arthur was talking to the nun, telling her how scared he was. It broke me. Story 71. The Last of Us and the sequel. But the sequel overwhelmed me in a way that made me wish I could erase it from my memory and pretend it never existed. It is so bad. Story 72. The Last of Us Part 2, if you have only seen the show, is nothing compared to the game. The show is honestly a joke compared to the game. Story 73. Take off that mask so I can see my nephew. I had stayed up all night on a Thursday during my sophomore year of high school to work on the launch. I completed the story by dinner the next day. Story 74. Tibia. It really hurts to die and lose 9 days' worth of progress, and have your loot stolen by someone else. Then finding out that the same person was the actual reason you died in the first place, as they had set up a trap. Story 75. I wouldn't consider it a full video game, more of a small independent project called Bad Parenting. It had its hype on social media, but the underlying messages are very unsettling. Things like that happen all the time around us. Story 76. Final Fantasy VII, Original and Remake plus Intermission, and Amori. There is also a game on itch.io called Goodbye Meow Me that deeply affected me. Story 77. To the Moon, Opus Echoes of Starsong, and Spiritfarer. All three had me flat out ugly crying at the end. Spiritfarer still gets me when I think about a particular character and their story. Honorable mentions to both Ori games, Ori and the Blind Forest and Ori and the Will of the Wisps. Especially a small side quest in Ori and the Will of the Wisps that hurt very much. Story 78. Honestly, any fighting game such as Soul Calibur, Mortal Kombat, or Street Fighter. If there is an overly difficult boss fight, I am ruined. Story 79. Getting a negative ending in Bible Black made me feel terrible, and I never played the game again. Story 80. Super Meat Boy, and more specifically going for and obtaining all of its achievements. It simply changes you as a person. Story 81. Elden Ring. As my first and only Souls-like game so far, I can say that the game has emotionally affected me many times. Story 82. Before Your Eyes is the only piece of media that makes me cry every single time I play or watch someone play it. It has a beautiful story, and the eye-tracking mechanic it uses is really neat. Story 83. Metal Gear Solid 3 every time. It has me doing profound existential pondering sessions for a whole day after completing it, and I play it once annually. Story 84. Lost Odyssey. The bits of story you pick up that tell about the main character's loves before the game always bring me to tears. I don't think there has been a playthrough where I didn't have to pause and take a minute or two after reading through the memories. Story 85. I have sort of lost my passion for gaming, but no game has impacted me more than From Software and the Souls series. These games made me a stronger person in real life and someone who wanted more than just playing video games. They taught me to enjoy the struggles in life, so to speak, because things do tend to get easier as practice leads to progress, and what was once hard becomes routine as well as less fulfilling. Story 86. Emily is away. It is so dumb. I do not know why I felt low-key heartbroken for like a month after I finished that game. Story 87. Black Myth Wukong. That game made me both frustrated and motivated. When you reach the end and learn the story, it is emotional how troubled the story is. I cried because of why the destined one was chosen. Story 88. Until then, honestly one of the most compelling stories I have ever experienced. The setting especially immersed me because it is based in my home country. I barely noticed that 20 hours had passed when I finished it in a single weekend. Story 89. Final Fantasy VII. I was 15 years old, and when Sephiroth killed Aerith, I sobbed like an idiot, put down the game, and did not play it again for at least 2 years. Story 90. There are two answers I always give to this. To the Moon made me a complete wreck, and I loved every minute of it. Journey was a more specialized experience. I was matched with a random player right off the bat, and I played the whole game with them. The ending was pretty impactful for me. When the credits rolled, it showed the name of the player I was matched with written in Japanese characters. The fact that I was able to play such an emotional game with someone I normally wouldn't have been able to speak to added a whole other layer to the experience. Story 91. Final Fantasy VII. Crisis Core. Playing the original game and finding the secret cutscene prepared me for what happens to Zack. But the execution of it, plus the music that plays, is powerful. Playing that song on Theatrhythm, final bar line is difficult through the tears. Story 92. Ever Oasis. Nintendo 3DS Japanese role-playing game. Looks like Monster Hunter stories. Colorful and fun. Seems like a typical happy ending story. Characters join your party, all looking to rescue blight-infested relatives. The story beats seem predictable until you start fighting them. You set their souls free, including your character's own lost brother. You give them peace, but they are spirits, dead to your world. You don't save a single intended character, and your water spirit guide sacrifices herself to bring lush plains back to the desert. She doesn't even get to see the restored world, and life just moves on. It affected me deeply once I finished because I felt entitled to the power of friendship, saving everyone. Instead, I got a lesson on loss and grief. Story 93, Wolfenstein 2, if you know. The only game I have ever quit using Alt plus F4, and it took me a few weeks to even consider going back to it. Story 94, Signalis. It really made me think about how far I would go to save someone I love, to keep my promise to them. I have someone like this in my life now, so it hits harder. Story 95, It Takes Two. I did not care much for the child, but the elephant begging you to stop torturing her was terrifying. Story 96, Witcher 3. When I tried so hard to save Ciri and got the bad ending. I reloaded a save from way back and looked up a guide on how to do it better. I treated it like a bad dream of Geralt's. Story 97, Valiant Hearts. The Great War really surprised me. I still listen to the soundtrack sometimes and reminisce about the ending. Story 98. This one may not be as emotional as others, but for me it is Professor Layton and the Unwound Future. I do not usually cry with movies or games, not from a macho perspective, but this one made me cry at the end. Story 99. Leap of Faith made me cry into my pillow at night. It was not something easily explained to my wife. Being a detective was a close second. Story 100. It's a brand new game, but honestly, I loved it so much I put my social life on pause to dive in. The Altars came out June 13th. So many choices to make, so much character, and the endings hit hard. You can feel the love the developers put into this game. I just finished it tonight and immediately went to bed to lay down next to my partner. I know that all the small things count. This game was a strong reminder. Please give this game a try. Story 101. Final Fantasy 15. That ending hit pretty hard, mostly because a friend who had died years ago would have loved it, and the rendition of Stand By Me was very emotional. Story 102. Ori and the Blind Forest had me feeling all sorts of emotions, particularly during its prologue, and Ori and the Will of the Wisps ending was a similar tearjerker. Story 103. Before Clive goes to the last battle, he says goodbye to his girl and dog, and you can tell he knows he is not going to see them again. Story 104. Demo. By the time I was done, I wanted to sue for emotional damages. It had such an impact on me that I played the final song on loop for weeks. Story 105, Mass Effect 3 ending. I couldn't stand watching Commander Shepard getting fried or vaporized and always chose the Renegade ending, but he dies regardless. Felt like I lost a close friend. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.